Hey, what up everybody? I'm here today to go over the Dragon Ball Z timelines in hopefully a straightforward and easy to understand way. And a major special thanks to Anti-Metaman for their Konsenshu article, a very in-depth account of all things Dragon Ball time travel. I highly recommend giving it a read, and I will link to it in the description as well as Anti-Metaman's Twitter. Go ahead and check them out. But let's begin by traveling back in time to Dragon Ball Z to timeline number 3. The original timeline. So in this timeline, Frieza arrives on Earth as he did in the show, however is defeated by Goku. Then later on down the line, Goku catches the heart virus and dies. Now if that wasn't bad enough, androids 17 and 18 activate and wreak havoc on the world, spurring Bulma to build a time machine for Trunks to go back in time. She gives him the heart virus medication of the future, and he goes back from age 784 to age 764. Now this is what we see in the show. Frieza arrives on Earth and Trunks kills Frieza, afterward giving the heart virus medication to Goku so that he can take it and not die of the heart virus. Now this action causes the timelines to split into timeline number 3 and to timeline number 1. Timeline number 3 being the original timeline, timeline 1 being the main timeline that we see in the series. Now after giving the medication to Goku and warning them of the androids appearing in 3 years, Trunks travels back to the future. However, unfortunately, it takes 1 full year to create enough fuel for the time machine to make another round trip. So Trunks waits for the full year and travels back from age 785 to age 767 to somehow find a weakness for the androids by watching Goku fight them or bring Goku back to the future with him. Now this is where it's important to note the rules of time travel, because Trunks traveling back this second time does not create a new timeline. This is because there are no changes made resulting in a paradox. Whereas the first time Trunks traveled back in time, the paradox would be Goku dies of the heart virus, leading to Trunks going back in time with the heart virus medication, allowing Goku to survive. So by Dragon Ball time travel rules, we need 1 timeline where Goku dies, where Trunks goes back in time, and 1 timeline where Goku lives and trains for 3 years in preparation for the androids, and in age 767, Trunks arrives for the second time from the future. Now for this next part, we're going to go a little bit more in depth in a minute, but for now, we're just going to keep going on down the sequence of events. Now, eventually, Krillin and Trunks find Dr. Gero's basement lab and, subsequently, the blueprints for androids 17 and 18. Meaning that Trunks now has what he needs to defeat the androids in the future. He doesn't need to bring Goku back with him or anything. So he takes the blueprints to the future for future Bulma to create a shutdown controller for the androids. Trunks uses the shutdown controller to defeat the androids, finally making peace for his future. Or does he? In age 788, Cell kills future Trunks, steals his time machine, and travels back to age 763, 1 year before Frieza's arrival on Earth. This event leads to yet another paradox. The paradox being that Cell's arrival in the past, while not in and of itself being the cause, it does eventually lead to Bulma and Trunks finding out about Cell and Trunks' decision to stay in the past instead of return to the future. So if Trunks decides to stay in the past, there is no Trunks to go back to the future for Cell to kill to steal his time machine to go back in the past, leading to Trunks finding out about Cell and deciding to stay in the past. Therefore, to alleviate this paradox, we need 2 Trunkses. 1, the main Trunks, which we follow in the story, who decides to stay, train in the Room of Spirit and Time, and participate in the Cell games. The second Trunks is the Trunks I talked about earlier, the one who went back to the future and is eventually killed by Cell. So therefore, timeline 1 is split into 2 timelines. Timeline 1, the main timeline that we follow in the story, and timeline 4, the unseen timeline, from which Trunks found some way to deal with the androids in the future, most logically the blueprints in Dr. Gero's basement, and immediately goes back to the future to deal with the androids and gets killed by Cell. Now, I know that the numbering and splitting of all these timelines is a little bit awkward, but it's important to note that the main timeline, number 1, is the one that we follow in the story. the one where Cell arrives, leading to Trunks seeing the picture of the time machine and deciding to stay. Timeline number 4, the unseen timeline, being the one without a cell, therefore no possibility of any photograph of a time machine for Trunks to see and decide to stay. Trunks finds the blueprints for the androids, goes back to the future, and gets killed by Cell. And I should note that this is also the official numbering from Daizenshu 7, but we proceed with the 3 timelines that we currently have. 1, the main timeline, 3, the future Trunks timeline, and 4, the unseen timeline. Now, in the main timeline, as we saw in the series, Trunks participates in the Cell games, is killed by Perfect Cell, Gohan defeats Perfect Cell, Trunks is brought back to life with the Dragon Balls, and proceeds back to his own future. Now, as we saw before, Trunks had the blueprints or some way to defeat the androids of the future, and defeated them and was killed by Cell. However, this Trunks is much more powerful, having spent a year in the Room of Spirit and Time with Vegeta, and becoming an ascended Super Saiyan. Therefore, he proceeds to destroy Android 17 and 18 with his own power. Years later, in 788, defeats Cell before he is able to kill Trunks and go back to the past, leading to, you guessed it, another paradox. Cell kills future Trunks, steals his time machine, goes back to the past, leading to Trunks seeing the photo of his time machine and deciding to stay, train in the Room of Spirit and Time and become much more powerful, going back to the future, destroying the androids with his own power, and killing Cell before he is able to kill him. Therefore, to alleviate this particular paradox, we need to have a Cell that killed Trunks and take his time machine, and one where Trunks destroys Cell. Therefore, timeline number 3 is split into timeline number 3 and timeline number 2, the new future Trunks timeline. And by the end of it all, we have 4 timelines total in Dragon Ball Z. Timeline 2 being the one where future Trunks comes back in time in Dragon Ball Super. So if this wasn't confusing enough, you can check out my Dragon Ball Super Timelines video. I will link that in the description as well. There's a couple of very minor flaws with it, but the explanation overall is pretty solid and straightforward, which I might do a revised version of that, or possibly one on the manga, since the manga doesn't deal with a paradox. So as always, put your thoughts, questions, comments below in the comments, and check out those links in the description, and take it easy.